Good afternoon, everybody. Let's try it one more time. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michael Alford, Vice President and Director of Athletics, and I just wanted to come and say a few words real quick, just thank everyone. Discovery Days, Scott has informed me a lot of what's going on, and Nicole, you throw great events wherever you are, and I want to thank you. There you are. I want to thank you. And Dr. Ormsbee and Evangeline, unbelievable on what they do and how we lead and how we prepare our students and the help they give our athletics department. Because we, and Scott and I talk about it all the time, I want to be the most cutting edge, think outside the box department you could possibly have when it comes to sports science. We want to set the standard because that's what Florida State does, is set standards for other people to emulate. And we have big plans and we're in constant communication. I want the best, brightest students, and we have that at Florida State, that get to have real world experience of working with our student athletes who, once again, you're at Florida State, they're elite. And how they go about their business, how they prepare for their sport, but more importantly, how they prepare academically. Because we have a holistic view in what we try to do with our student athletes. We give them the very best training that they can have. We have coaches of world-class character that are leading our 600 student athletes. We have staff members that are working with them daily and making sure that they have the very best care that you could possibly have. And then they get to go to this great institution and graduate from a top 25 public institution in America. There's not any other school in the country, in my opinion, that provides that holistic view better than what Florida State does. And I just want to thank everyone in this room because you have a big impact on what we're able to go offer and attract in the very best student athletes, because we do come back and share these stories of name something that we don't provide the best, whether it's nutritionally, medical care, academically, facility-wise. We're getting best, and we continue to want to push the envelope and look at different ways that we can do to improve not only their experience, but improve the university's clinical research experience. And that's what we're constantly striving to do. So I just want to welcome y'all. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do for not only our department, but for this university, because we are going to set a new standard in this field, and I can't be more excited than to be a part of it. And anything I can do to assist y'all just let me know. But I just want to welcome everybody and thank you for your time.
All right, so now I get the honor of introducing our esteemed speakers for today's session, called Translating Science into Practice, literally. So first we have Dr. Mike Ormsbee. He's a professor and the graduate program director in the College of Education, Health, and Human Sciences. And he's also the director of the Institute of Sports Sciences and Medicine here at FSU. You might see it over by the track. We also have Elisa. She's the Assistant Athletics Director of Sports Performance. She directs strength and conditioning for Olympic sports here at FSU, and she is the Associate Director of Athletics Research at the ISSM. Finally, we have Scott Trulock. He's the Associate Athletics Director for Health and Performance, and he directs sports medicine for FSU. So please join me in welcoming our speakers. And we'll just give acknowledgments to all of the amazing people who help make this work happen every day, right here in the stadium and across this campus at all of our facilities. But a special thank you to our student athletes and our coaching staff who have bought into this process and have made all of what we're doing today and sharing with you a huge success. Today we're going to be featuring data from just a few of our sports teams, but we are working with the athletes across all of the programs, and we want to thank them as well. So now I will hand it off to Dr. Ormsbee.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. It's really exciting to finally be in a format where I can speak to this greater crowd about what we've been doing in this space for a long time. And I tell you, it seems like an overnight success where we're just talking about it today, but we've been working on this relationship for over a decade to make all of this work. And it's been a lot of effort to make that happen. And I get the pleasure of traveling quite a bit to talk about the relationship that we have with athletics and the sports science that we're up to and the research that we're doing. And almost every place that I go to says, that doesn't exist. And so what we do have here is really, really special. We have created an environment where academics and athletics actually work together. You'd think that was commonplace, but it definitely is not. So it's really exciting to be able to share what we're up to. Because this has a theme of sports science to it, I want to share with you these quotes that I've seen, and it really sort of brings to context what we work on. So the top thing says, measuring the wind doesn't make someone a meteorologist, nor does strapping on a GPS on an athlete make one a sports scientist. And it's the second part. It's what do you do with that information, and that's the real critical part about it. The ability to observe, make sense of the larger trends, and with application of this, ultimately makes you the sports scientist. And so that's what we work on in our facility and our training of the students and our working with the athletes. And so when I first met with the athletics group, this is the paradigm that was shown. And you can tell everything centers around the student athlete and their health and performance. And look at all of the people involved just to support the student athlete here at FSU. Starting at the top, you can see sports medicine, and as you work around, you can see areas you might be interested in, from athletic training to sports nutrition, sports psychology, sport coaches, sports sciences, strength and conditioning. I just feel so blessed because those are things that I sort of can touch at any single day in a research perspective. And what I think is missing from this, and sort of we can add to it, and the thing that we are going to talk about today, is that the research angle really can tap into any one of those boxes. That's the place where we make this a big win for FSU and a big win for what we're trying to accomplish in our research and health for the athletes, as well as performance for the athletes, is that we now add a research component with big-time athletics. And so that leads us to sort of the team goals. What are the goals that are trying to come from just the team mindset? And I think, obviously, the top one there is maximizing student-athlete health and performance. We want to work on minimizing the injury recovery time, maintaining player availability. We often say the best ability is availability. And if a player is not available, then you are just out entirely. And so ultimately, winning championships is the goal. But it doesn't mean we haven't faced a lot of barriers, particularly as we're trying to merge athletics and research in some way. And these are some of them. There's a disconnect that we always have, or have traditionally had, between researchers and coaches. And one of the big things is we keep our jobs for different reasons. Coaches are judged on wins, and I'm judged on papers. I need to publish a paper, but a coach doesn't care about a paper. They want data now. And so that is how we sort of framed our team to sort of work in a playground where we can provide immediate data and long-term data that could affect the entire industry and field of sports nutrition. And by the way, that last point there in the box is important. By the time I publish a paper, which takes 2 or 3 years, it's a good chance the whole coaching staff's gone. And that's the reality of it, is that the information we're answering, the questions we're answering, need to be driven by the coaches and the athletes so that we can actually answer them and make it meaningful to the athlete while they're actually here. And so if we carry on sort of the other issues and barriers that we face along the way, is that we collect a lot of data, and the coaches know this and the players know it for sure. Over 500 plus student athletes on multiple types of technology, multiple devices, all coming into the coaches on the daily. In addition to that, somebody needs to process that data in real time, make decisions about what they're seeing, and decide about player availability, as well as readiness to go that day, and just the workload that they're going to use in training or in a game. It takes a long time to do that. So cleaning the data, de-identifying that data so people like me can look at it, analyzing the data for publishing, all of that takes time and money. And so we are often in a place where we have to highly prioritize what we're doing because of a lack of people and finances to actually make that happen. And so we've been working against that sort of landscape over time. But nevertheless, just want to share with you 2 or 3 slides in the last bit of my portion about what we've done in the research area throughout some of the technology we've been using. One of the things that came on board over the COVID time is we had to pivot, where we had to try to use technology that was already existing, and many of the athletes were already wearing these Whoop bands and these wrist-worn monitors where you can measure things like heart rate variability, recovery, sleep metrics, et cetera. And so we've done a lot of work in that space looking at the data that was de-identified from the coaching staff. And so we've done work with this chilly sleep paradigm where we actually had these cold beds, mattress toppers brought in, and had the athletes sleeping at different temperatures to try to see how their sleep may change, better or worse. We have done a lot of work. We're trying to publish those papers at this time, where we did it in a normal condition, and then we also did it through the playoffs with soccer a few years ago. And then on the right, you can see some data that just shows kind of a line going up. Well, that led to this paper. This made a lot of news in the last 2 weeks here at FSU. Thank you to the FSU media people for covering all this. It's really helpful for us when this gets out and about. But because of the lead of the performance team, particularly Coach Angelis, what they're able to do is identify COVID up to 3 days early on players and isolate them and pull them out of practice or team settings so that the rest of the team wouldn't become infected. And that was, it wasn't sure-proof, but that technique worked something like 14 of 16 times for the athletes that did test positive during that time. So using that technology clearly helped the health and safety, and then again, availability being the number one priority. They kept the team available to play. And then we had the pleasure of writing up the data that ultimately gets published, and I've had a lot of interviews on that paper lately. Another one we've done in this similar space is we decided to use these Whoop bands and some of the data that Whoop was collecting, and we've looked at that now to look at feeding trends, what people are eating, and what are they eating before sleep in particular, which is a big focus in our institute, and we are finding like, all right, these little carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, which you're all eating in your box lunches right now, is really important for us, and particularly this protein dose is pretty low. I wanted to share with you in context that we recommend 40 grams of protein before sleep, and the athletes are only getting 7.6 grams. And that's for recovery, potentially sleep, and certainly some aspects of muscle recovery and regeneration. So we're now able to see and then put in educational pieces that could help the athlete health and safety and recovery because of the ability to work with these elite athletes and put it all together using the technologies that exist here and adding new technologies every single time. All right, so that's my research side. Now you can hear from the in the trenches folks. I'm going to pass this off to Scott.
Thank you, Michael. I wanted to show this picture. Obviously, it was from a couple weeks ago. I think this picture will become one of our more iconical ones with Keon. But just to kind of illustrate, it's a reminder of all we do. It's about the student athletes. It's about their experience and all of us working together to kind of complement what they're doing and support them. But obviously, the point to make, sorry to go back, expectations is keep in mind there is so much pressure on these student athletes. A lot of us see what we see on TV, but we don't always know what's going on behind the scenes. But obviously, student athletes not just playing football, but it's the academic challenges that they have. And just a reference, I think football last year set the all-time GPA record. And that credit goes to Coach Norvell. Yeah, thank you. So Coach Norvell obviously puts a lot of emphasis on that, but the challenge is academic. Obviously issues from home. There are a lot of stressors, a lot of these student athletes that are going through, not just what you see on the field, but in the weight room. There's lots of training that goes on. We're obviously, as Dr. Ormsbee mentioned, nutrition is a critical part of that as well as sleep, and then the support system. What I love about this picture is you look on the sideline, obviously Keon looks like he pretty much knows what to do when he has a football in his hands, but here's Jeff Cupper, our director of student development, and here's a part of our support system encouraging. But here's Dr. Bill Thompson. So obviously he's not sure that the student, that Keon knows where to go, so he's making sure to point him in the right direction. So always there to help guide and direct. But just understanding what all is going on around the student athletes. So what I wanted to share today, Jackson Schaefer is our director of sports science for football. So he works with Josh Storms. He's one of the critical members that helps analyze the data that we use. Obviously, they just finished practice, so they are in the middle of a training session, and he's a key part of that. But one of the major pieces that football uses is the Catapult GPS tracking system. Catapult system is the GPS system that measures speed and distance. So we have athletes that are wearing those, so it's constantly measuring how fast they're going, how much distance they're covering. And it also creates what we call player load, combining all those things together. And we use that. We use that to make decisions on how much someone's progressing. If some of the athletes were trying to modify during practice, it helps us better quantify their loads, and even for full participants. And we're using it in what we call both micro and macro levels. We're watching what's going on within a practice, and we're also seeing what have they done over a week, what we call chronic load, of seeing over a week, over 2 weeks, what has been their workloads. And obviously our strength coaches use that to make decisions on how much more they need to do outside of practice. So these are things in the past, not that we were doing it wrong, but we didn't have data, we didn't have science, we didn't have numbers to help us make those decisions. So the devices actually go kind of on the back behind the shoulder pad. It's the size of a small cell phone. And then off to the side, there's the computer and the monitor, so we're able to monitor these things in real time during practice. So what I wanted to show you is an example of, on the right, this is a game and this is practice. So the lines are showing the player load. So obviously these spikes show this is like a full speed sprint. So obviously football is a sport, if you think about it, it's about 3 to 6 seconds of activity and then about 30 seconds of rest. So this is just showing a play would represent a spike. And what we wanted to show is this is actual data from a game. And this was the LSU game. This was his touchdown early in the game. So you can kind of see where his speed hit. And then as we look, what we bracketed is this was when we went and hurry up offense. So there's little to no recovery time, series of spikes. This was halftime here. And then this was a period later in the game where we're actually slowing it down a little bit. And the point we're trying to make is we can take this data, and now this is what we want to duplicate in practice. So this is where we work with the coaches to say, okay, let's design a practice to make sure we're preparing for what they're going to need to do in a game. So we actually make sure, hey, let's hit some early high speeds early in practice, so we want to see that spike. We know we're going to do this in a game, so we need to have those kind of compressive loads. So again, it's giving us actual numbers that we can sit down with the coaches and show, hey, this is why we need to do certain things in practice. Another way we use this data, so this is an example of training camp. So what we're showing here is this is the average for the entire team, everybody that's measured, okay? What we learned, and especially the NFL helped us a lot with this, they have a lot of contained data. They can do a great job with that with 32 teams. But what we learned over the years is if we had 4 straight days, that's when we saw an injury spike. So we learned what we need to avoid is 4 straight days of intensity. So that's why we have a recovery day within there. And even days where we go 4 straight in this second segment, we have 1 light day. So this is very much by design. 3 practices off, then we do 4 with 1 light day there, and that starts to simulate our in-season structure, because that's what we do during the season. Tuesday and Wednesday are intense, Thursday's a low intensity day, and then we ramp back up on Friday. And so in training camp, we're trying to mimic that. We obviously want to hit, what we show there is we know what the game load's going to be, and we want to at least get 110% of that. So again, we're challenging them above threshold to prepare them for a game. So again, this is how we use data, share with our coaches, and design practices accordingly. So one of the barriers we face, right now we have 70 sensors. So football roster is actually 124. So we're a little over half of our players have sensors. And so obviously we're able to track a lot of the student athletes that are playing more, and that's helpful. But we're really not capturing the spectrum that we want to. And so we'd eventually like to be able to capture all of them, because sometimes we look within one position group and we want to know, hey, the most versus the least in terms of what their practice load is, because that helps us determine, hey, who we want to get more reps to kind of build that load up. And also sometimes from an injury standpoint, if one of those players is not being tracked, we don't have that data in order to help us determine that progression. So that's kind of our next step, is we want to kind of increase the resources there so that we can track everybody. All right, another one of the systems that we use to track data, obviously one of the most significant injuries we see in sprinting sports is hamstring injuries. So that's an area where we try to focus on and make sure that we're measuring and preparing. And the device we use is called the Nord board. What it's doing is it's measuring power output in the hamstrings during an eccentric phase. What we know from injuries, the eccentric phase where the muscle's working but lengthening is the most likely situation where we see an injury, so we're actually testing that. Let me see if I can get the video to play here. So what he does, it's basically a controlled fall, and then the system, you can see on the graph to the right, is measuring his hamstring force output. okay? The orange line is his right, blue on the left, so you can see there's a consistent gap. So he's got a consistent difference or deficiency from one hamstring to another, and that's commonly what we'll see, certainly with someone with an injury history of that hamstring, but also it can be something going on in the low back. There's a lot of different things that can cause that, but that's at least our starting point to understand where that deficit is. And instead of just monitoring them in the weight room, we now have objective measures to determine that. So what this does, it ultimately puts out a graph, and we're able to see, again, we've got that consistent gap there. So we know where we need to work. We know we need to focus more of our training and our rehabilitation on his right side, do more isolated exercises to help make up that gap. We'll use this very commonly after someone's had a hamstring injury. This is what we'll use because we don't want them to start sprinting until we see this gap closed. So a lot of times when people are saying, hey, he feels great, he has no pain, well, what we're seeing here is a strength deficit, and we know if he starts sprinting, he's going to be at a high risk of re-injury. So that's kind of how the data helps us. Next steps. We've mentioned before when we talk about some of the data like Catapult and even the Nord board, we call that external data. That's performance-based. We're seeing what they're doing. But as Dr. Ormsbee mentioned, the Whoop band is so valuable because it tells us internal data. It tells us what's going on in the body. So one of the next steps for us when we're looking at muscle performance are these Strive technology. This is a company out in California, and they basically make these compression shorts that have the EMG sensor. So we're actually able to monitor the electrical output of the quads, the hamstrings, and the glute. It's kind of small, but you can't see it well, but basically this is the glute, this is the hamstring, and this is the quad. So what we're looking at here is the activation and then the frequency. And one of the things, this is actual data from one of our student athletes when we demoed him, is what we saw is his frequency was really high in his quads, but the level of activation was low. So there again, that's our concern, is because we know how much they're firing, but relatively speaking, the activation is low. So to kind of look at the report that this data puts out, this is one practice, so obviously start a practice to the end. The top, the yellow is the quad data, the pink is the hamstring, and then the glute is the purple. And what you can see is over the time of the practice, basically we see that quad fading. We see the quad involvement going down, and the glutes are having to compensate more for that. So what we know is, number one, he could be at a risk of injury. And the other question is not just from an injury, but fatigue standpoint. So what's this athlete's ability? If he's a receiver, is he going to be able to decelerate? Is he going to be able to make a cut when he needs to at the end of a game? So again, this is starting to generate some internal data. This is a device we demoed a year ago. The LA Rams use it heavily, and it's something we're interested in the future because it's giving us some more of that internal data that we're looking for. So next steps before Elisa comes up. So obviously our goal, we're trying to build tools for coaches and staff to synthesize data from all devices in one place. So you can see we're starting to get more data here, and it's very easy to get what we call paralysis by analysis. Okay, and that's our job, is to make sure when we go to our coaches, we're bringing actionable information. So we're trying to consolidate these data points. Work with more teams to apply these technologies. Again, we're only so big right now as a staff. We're doing what we can to work with some of our teams, but we have lots of ideas. We have lots of things we think we can do to help other teams. And obviously help athletes stay healthy. Like health and performance are intimately related. You're going to be able to only be able to perform your best if you're healthy. So there's a heavy overlap there. And provide opportunities for more professionals and students to learn methods and do research with athletes. There's lots of opportunity for us to expand with our research partners with our student athletes. Again, we have great ideas, our coaches are ready, and so now it's about putting the professionals and students in place. Obviously, we want to advance the research field of sports science is our goal. And, our barometer is winning championships. Sometimes we have to remember that's what we're all here for. We're all here to support the student athlete and their, and their endeavors and what they're trying to do. I know it's early October, but all we can do is affect things up to this point. And as we sit here at this point, in October, football, soccer, and volleyball all sit atop the ACC standings. So a lot of work to do. A lot of work to do, but that's the goal, and that's where we're trying to continue to strive to achieve. So Angela's going to get up and kind of demonstrate some other things about how we're putting this data to use. Thank you.
Okay, so some of the things I'll speak about, and I guess a bit remiss, let me please take a step back and to talk about what Dr. Ormsbee had mentioned in the beginning of The relationships that we have here do not exist in many places. I would argue to say if any other place as great as our relationships are here. I think at the base of any good program are great relationships with within your own staffs, within different departments and everything like that. So to have, to look out here and see all of the different departments that we work with, absolutely amazing. The fact that we can lean on each other and work together for the same common cause makes our jobs amazing and helps us be even better at our jobs that are, Scott touched on the barriers. A major barrier is lack of desire to work together or I'm going to stay in my lane and I'm going to only do this. Don't ask me about what I'm doing. You focus on what you're doing. When we can break those barriers down and work together, everybody wins. And in this environment here at Florida State, we win as staff members because our jobs are pretty great. Our staff or our student athletes win because we can serve them at a higher level to help lift them up so they can rise to perform at their best, whether it be in the classroom or on the field or holistically as humans to operate on a higher level. Because those barriers have been broken down, everyone's able to be better. So a huge thank you to everybody that's here and everyone that consists in the FSU community, because it makes everything significantly better. With this, so why we put a couple other things in here, force deck. So the NORD board was one thing that was demonstrated. Are you doing that? Am I doing that? So the force decks are another form of, or they come from the same company as the NORD board. So if you're looking at this individual, it's 2 force plates. You're standing on one, standing on the other. If you can see the computer underneath, it's showing the different force traces of each plate. So in your right foot and your left foot, how are you applying force? How are you absorbing force? How quickly are you doing it? All of those things. So just very sensitive scales and able to track those forces for the individual over time. What the number of data points in just that, so what we're looking at here is a team and 3 jumps. That's all that is. And the forces of each individual and what is their peak force, what is their mean force, what is their average force, right versus left, all of those things. So when we're talking about data, this is one technology and that's one sample. So now you add, let's say realistically we're using 5 pieces of technology. So externally, the catapult, the Connexon, internally, the Whoop, externally again with the NORD board and the force plates. DARI, it's a motion analysis, so it's a markerless system, 3D motion analysis, and just the number of data that's kicked out from that is overwhelming, absolutely overwhelming. So to be able to take all of those bits and pieces of information and put them together and make sense of it is extremely time consuming. So we rely on each other as our staff, and a reminder, our staff, strength and conditioning, we're the pick things up and put things down. The Hans and Franz of the past, if you remember Saturday Night Live, we're just, we're very, very frequently depicted as we yell at you, we make you run, we make you sprint, those types of things. Realistically, that is a portion of it. Yes, be strong, absolutely. If you are stronger, you are more resilient. But at the end of the day, we want you ready to compete, right? So what do we need to do when? And we use this data to help guide our programming as to what we should do when. But again, so we get all this information, we look at it, oh my gosh, what do we do with it? And this is one technology, this other technology spits it out, slightly different, and slightly different, and slightly different. Now what do we do with it? So again, as I talked about the relationships that we have, goodness, I think it started with Dr. Ormsbee and an FSU health meeting to where we crossed paths and just, someone being, excited to help someone else out to say, you know what, you should talk with them. Just knowing different people's areas of expertise and knowing the true desire to help of, wow, I know some people who, their specialty is technology. And you know what, these problems that you say you have, so if our problem is how do we get this information, organize it in a way that makes sense to us, even more so makes sense to our coaches and our student athletes. How do we get it there? Because what I'm looking at is just a bunch of numbers. To be able to sit down and share stories and be able to solve problems faster of, okay, and man, I don't even know the words. That sounds like a relations problem within Excel, BI, right? And we don't even know what it means. He's laughing because actually his product will be demoed here shortly. But wow, that's an easy problem. We can solve that to where our staff is taking classes in Microsoft BI and Excel and stuff like that. They're watching YouTube videos until midnight. Why? Because they want to be able to do their job to the best of their ability. Wow, I can be better at my job if I understand this more. So again, I'm continuing to talk about relationships because still that's the heart of it all. This is so a platform. Each one of our technologies has their own platform, which is great, but it's hard to manipulate the data with it. So, right, this is one person, and let's see, it's 3 jumps. Again, this is one person, 3 jumps, where we have where they're creating a visualization. But to be able to easily see the visualization, we have to get on their platform, click into them, and we may not be able to see things the way we want. So this is Eric. This is another individual on our staff and something that he created through Excel. So now what I'm showing you is just, our own kind of swing at let's try to make our own. So a phenomenal job by Eric, but yet it's still not what we know it's not what it could be. Here's another extremely technologically advanced Excel file. Again, of like how to, right? I'm showing our inability to create different visualizations. But what we were looking for at this point in time is we're looking at recovery data, and when there was a deviation from baseline, at least 18% or more for 2 consecutive days, then we're looking to make adjustments to the training schedule. So this is our very non-exciting attempt at that. Here is another one. Again, this is something that our staff created. And by our staff, I mean Shannon right here. It's another recovery report of what's your recovery today, what was the practice strain today, the daily strain recovery off of baseline. Again, these are just different, a lot of information. This would be a coach's report to be able to look at their team, so each athlete, and color-coded, are we red, are we green, are we yellow, to hopefully make then decisions faster. From the multiple meetings that we've had of how do we get to here, like this is where we want to end up, and this is in like day 3 of actual working. Of how we got to this point is talking about the projects that we're doing. So Justin Jacobs works within the athletics department. He's an assistant athletic director over information technology. And talking about here's our pie in the sky. We want to be able to have these player profiles and have just a hub of all of our data. But it's just a pie in the sky of how do we get that, because I don't know. And he was like, well, actually, like that's awesome. That seems pretty simple. But it takes time. It takes time to organize all those systems. It takes the ability to call up each of the different companies to have the conversation of, okay, we need an API where I don't have the best description for it, but where just a code, a key to get into their system that automatically sucks the information in, where we don't have to log on and copy paste or literally type it from their platform into our Excel, where it's all just there. We hit refresh and boom, it's there. But I don't have the ability to have those conversations, the knowledge, or I think I may have had one of those conversations and they told me it was gonna be $5,000. And I'm like, no, I don't have the budget for that. We don't have the budget for that. How can this happen? But Justin took on those conversations because he's like, it's actually not that hard. Here's how you do it. But again, it takes time and effort, and that's not his job in general to have all of these different conversations. And then those companies don't want to respond that quickly, and it's a back and forth. And so this has been Big picture, it's been like 6 years in the building, but he knew about it 6 years ago, but this past maybe 6 months is when he's been able to really take it and run with it. And that's when the University Information Services technology got on board, and then just that was the, kind of the speed button to get to this, where now all of the data, so the connections were made with the different companies now. So Snowflake is the technology that they use to just suck it all in, and I'm doing a huge disservice to the description of this process. But it's for it to all be in the same place, right? To say this is Elisa's data, but the E was capitalized in this one, but it wasn't on that, because the students make their own accounts and all of these headaches where we would face that problem, and now we're stuck for another month trying to figure out where that's 2 minutes of them. Yep, got it, here, easy, moving on. So this is what this is showing is, when I put this down, once on this side, once on that side, right? Because each of this, so if you see softball as a team, swimming as a team, for us, right, those are all separate files on our computer. The date, the team, what we're looking on the top graph is each individual, so each bar is a person, and then there's strain. Strain is how much work is done on a given day. It goes up to 20, but so just looking at this, we've got a 19, a 17.8, 20.5. This is a pretty hard day. And this below would be the recovery on the day. So sorry, this would be the strain of the previous day, and then the recovery of today, right? So again, this would be a coach's report. We may give something like this to our sport coaches to take a look at quickly. So if I'm a sport coach and I get this report and I would take a look at this and I'd be like, okay, who's this? This one's Cindy. Cindy, why is Cindy red today? This one's Janine. Why is Janine red today? Okay, well, this makes sense. If I look up the day before was 20.5, so that's what I told you. 21 is the high. It's actually impossible to get to, but so 20.9 is the high, and she got to 20.5, so that's pretty high. So this red recovery, that makes sense. Same thing over here, the 20.5. So we work really hard one day, the next day it makes sense that you're not as recovered. Why we may also see that, if people didn't sleep well, if they are dehydrated, if they are stressed in general, right? Stress is stress and it'll affect your body. But either way, when we see these reds, so the red is kind of cause for concern, and you want to dig into that a little bit deeper. So what was created, if you right click on, say, one of the red ones, go through drill, like can we go, let's see, recovery? And from that, it just pops up what was that individual's previous recovery over these past few days. Like, okay, not too bad, so something, right, this makes sense. Or like if you were recovered, it's like, say it's a game day, you have a really high load, the next day, not recovered. But your teammates recovered pretty well, so then you're kind of digging into what's going on with that individual in particular. Maybe it's nutritionally, so we're touching base with our nutritionists of, the beet juice that they had before the match irritated their stomach and they didn't want to have any more. Like just all of these things that could happen, but we have this team to try and figure out. So this is amazing. I'm extremely grateful for it. I'm extremely excited because this is version 1. I guess let's call it version 2. If ours was version 1, it was really bad. But this is really exciting. There are platforms, right? There are subscription services where it will cost, like this will cost like $50,000, and it will not be, it's not going to work as much as we would like it to work. Like we have demoed these projects and stuff like that. I've been a little bit stubborn through the whole process of like, no, like we're at an institution of higher education. There are crazy, crazy, crazy smart people. We have to be able to build this. Like it just takes time. And I think that time is now. So it's extremely exciting for all of us to be able to have this information, be able to quickly make decisions for ourselves, to have conversations with sports medicine, whether they're research questions with that. The COVID, also a little side story with that. the COVID paper wouldn't have happened, so there was this thought process around, or some information had come out to be able to early identify COVID before any physical symptoms. And in my mind, like, is this real? Like, they're saying it, but I also know that I am partial because I like their product, I like the people there, those types of things. But to be able to take that theory and say, hey, doc, what do you think? And for him to use his network of individuals of, is this real or is this just fake news? So to be able to utilize him as a resource to then take that information, give that to our student athletes, have criteria for our staff to look out for, or what to look out for to make better decisions. But again, that doesn't hold any weight. Like me saying it holds much more value if he's backing it up and they're backing it up, of we're working together to boost everybody along. I think that's all we have.
All right, so we have lots and lots of time for questions. We hope you guys have some for our speakers. I'll be walking around with a mic, but you're also welcome to walk up to this standing mic here. And let's get a conversation started. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, thank you. It's a great presentation. It's very, very good work. I wonder, there are thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of physical therapists around this country looking after people who aren't the caliber of athlete that you're obviously looking after and that you're rightly focused on. But to what extent are the things that you're developing going to be applicable as a sort of trickle down to that population and to the population at large that, you know, we're all being told we should exercise more and eat right and all the rest of it? I mean, you're doing things which seem to me to have a lot of application to many, many other fields and many other populations.
Yeah, I agree with you. We sure do. I think one of the things that we're so fortunate to do at the Institute is, you know, I say this a lot, but FSU's known for a lot, but like two big things that FSU's known for is research and athletics, and that all comes together with us, which is really cool. And that's one arm of what we do. We also have an entire clinical medical space where we do work with general pop and all types of disease states. Obesity, diabetes, Parkinson's, MS, you name it. We've done a lot of work in these different spaces. This is just our athletics arm, and many of it does trickle down. In fact, some of the original COVID work we're talking about, there were already papers out that did this work in general pop and saw this in like the Mayo Clinic. And so finding it to also be true in elite athletes where you wouldn't expect the needle to move so far was really a big win, where they're so healthy that are we going to pick up anything? And we did. I'll tell you, the work in performance and elite athletes is even more difficult. For example, we work in evaluation and research of p-values. Is something significant or not? And I'll tell you, the difference between first and third place on a podium is not going to be statistically significant. There's not enough people, and the numbers are too close together. And so we have to work in this world of, even if it's not statistically significant, is it meaningful to an athlete? And so we kind of play in that space. And in our other work, which is clinical, we also see very much a benefit to some of these technologies. Now, admittedly, we're not doing force plate jumps and Nord boards on our aging populations with different disease states, but we do use exercise and nutrition strategies in order to improve their overall health and the performance as they define it. Maybe it's playing with their kids or their grandkids or walking up a staircase or something, but we also see that benefit.
Yeah, and I would say too, I mean, you can take some of the principles that we've established and apply them to everyday life. For instance, we've learned the injury spike is when you have like 4 heavy days in a row, right? Well, anybody could take that's for an elite athlete. So point being is I know physicians talking to people who've gotten injured trying to get in shape. Well, I went 7 straight days. Well, yeah, you can't do that, you know. So if you're a lay person, you can say, well, maybe let me start with 3 days and at least, you know, the importance of recovery. So even at the elite level, we've shown that recovery is an important part of it. So that's where I think even regular people can take what we've learned. We've done the work. So take those principles and apply them to everyday life.
This is really fantastic, great presentations. Just to follow up, Mike, on your point, how you have lots of numbers, and you illustrated beautifully how many numbers and data points you can get, but what's significant, right? And so when you see a difference, is that, we often look for clinical significance, right? You can get a p-value, but what really in an athlete's performance is significant? And as you say, significance is so now small. How do you determine? And do you use statisticians to figure this out for you, or do you? I think it may boil down to really blending numbers with research, right? And maybe the answer is you don't know yet, and it'll take years of looking at data and so forth. But how do you answer something like that? You get a lot of these numbers, and how do you make sense? And you struggle with that.
Sure. I think what each of us are looking at is different. What's important for the soccer team is different than what's important for the softball team, swimming, cross country, et cetera. So what are those numbers? And ideally, it always goes back to n=1, and every individual is their own individual and looking at their trend line over their time with us. Ideally, it's 4 years, 5 years. So if they have a redshirt year, something like that, 3 years, whatever it is, when we are testing them, we want that to be on the incline. We want to consistently get better, knowing that there are times where things may dip, but once you zoom out, everything should be getting better while they're here. If not, what are all of our different interventions, and what can we be doing differently? And maybe it's on our part with as the staff members, but also a large part of it is teaching them how to live healthy lives. And what does that look like, and how can we help you? Again, is it nutrition? Is it about sleep? Because again, getting those pieces of the puzzle correct will help you get better in every aspect of life, muscularly, cognitively, all functions will get better with that. So our KPIs, our key performance indicators, are different, but throughout their time with us, they should all continue to get better.
And I'll just add that it's definitely a blend of the things. Even with this COVID story, just because it's been popular, the data showed what it showed, but the coach needs to then look at that and say, oh, no, they're dehydrated, or maybe they went out last night or something, versus, oh, I think I need to pull them. There's a problem. And so clearly you need the person to interpret it that actually knows that player inside and out to then make the best decision for what's going to help.
Dr. Ormsbee, you've been around different states presenting, like you were saying, about the relationship that research has with athletics at Florida State, and that a lot of people say that doesn't exist at their institutions. What is your advice to those staff members? Because I'm sure they would also want a relationship like the one we have here.
Yeah, like I said, that took so long to develop, and it took the right people. The reason that exists is because of these two. The entire reason it exists is because of these two. You need the people in the right mind frame that just want to enhance everything, and kind of the egos are on the side, where we all think we're helping each other. I don't think it ever, the biggest problems I've seen before these guys were here was just more territorialism, like, this is mine, I want it, they're afraid of what you might add to it or take from it. And we just never viewed it that way. It was more of, we're all doing pretty neat things, how can we help each other and work in this synergistic way? And I think Elisa mentioned it, but the communication, the ability to communicate is so critical, that you have open communication with those individuals and just making that happen. Like we were having, for a long time, we'd have both of our research team and Hall the strength team, we'd go and have lunches together periodically and just talk, let everybody get to know each other, so that not just us, but everyone working with us in this space knows each other. So then it becomes much more open to just, hey, I saw this weird thing today, what do you think? Or how can we add that? Or I've got a whole bunch of data, you want to write something up? And our group sort of takes the big picture view and can write these papers for years, and these guys need data right away, but we still play in that same space. And it's, I'd say number one, communication, and then you got to be lucky with the right people in the right spaces. And I think the field's moving that way, but literally I have not seen this anywhere else.
I think if you go back to even a generation at how things have evolved, if you know, again, 10, 20 years ago, you had sport coaches that made all the decisions by themselves about what teams would do. They would meet with their athletic trainer, get the injury report, and would make minor adjustments based on that. And the evolution was eventually, hey, instead of just treating injuries, why don't we start trying to prevent them? You know, and that's when athletic trainers realized, well, our strength conditioning coaches are actually the experts in building our team's durability, you know, conditioning and strengthening. And so once that got involved, now the good sport coaches started seeing the value of that and said, wait a minute now, what I'm doing on the field needs to be in conjunction with what we're doing in strength conditioning. Now all of a sudden we started a decade ago getting Catapult and all these different devices. Now we've got numbers to support what we're seeing. And so there again, it's the coaches, up to them to realize and recognize the value of the different healthcare and performance professionals and how to integrate it. There are some spots we're doing it really good, and there are some spots where we've still got room to grow. But I can tell you, Elisa's been with our soccer program for a while, even through multiple coaches. Needless to say, the success speaks for itself, and her value is hard to, you know, the coaches rely on her constantly to make decisions with what they're doing every day in practice, what they're doing within games. Coach Norvell meets with Coach Storms and Jackson constantly. Like he's taking that information and he's making decisions about what they're doing in practice and games based on that. So that's where the evolution's occurred.
You know, Mike, first of all, thank you for being here. I think this is a perfect example of the synergy of the relationships we've established. Coach E, you're intentional. You come by all the time. Scott, you called me. Mike, I've known for years. But I guess my question is with coaches, obviously come and go, but particularly with the stability that we have here, it really stands across the board about, you know, some of the things you established. First, this COVID, you know, the research to be able to identify 3 days in advance to say, hey, this is something that would be valuable for coaches. How much data or autonomy do you have to be able to come to coaches to talk about certain opportunities of data to use for them? And are they receptive? Are they open? I know it varies per coach, but certainly I think you've done phenomenal work with soccer and volleyball and football. But is that something that you foresee going to even get stronger to be able to input some of that data to really show that we can make better decisions based off of not just on-field performance, but particularly injury-based science, strength, and everything else to go along with that?
There's a spectrum of, like, absolutely whatever it is, do this, and other people that may be a little more hesitant, but everyone is open to it. But then also what each coach has access to, sometimes it's dependent upon their budget. Sometimes it's dependent upon what they feel comfortable with. So each sport is a little bit different with that. So I think we are very fortunate with the support that we do have. And the results that we have also had to just be able to speak about it. And again, like, no judgment. If you want to use it, great. If you don't, great. We are here to support you. But here's a pretty good example of how it has worked. And I think the coaches speak to one another as well of how do you like this, how do you like that? And so organically it's growing.
And just here's the typical pattern whenever a new technology comes out, like Catapult, when it first came out. There's typically a younger generation that says, oh my gosh, this is the be-all and end-all. This is going to drive every decision, and this will replace everything we've ever done before, right? Well, obviously, the traditionalists say, that's crazy. You're not going to change the way I've coached for 20 years. You're not going to replace everything I've done. So the pendulum swings too far the other way, where they say this has no place in my world. So everybody goes to their corners. The answer is almost always somewhere in the middle, where, hey, this is a new tool, it has value, and that's our job to figure out how to apply that value. No, it's not going to replace everything we've done before. It's just another tool in the toolbox. You have a toolbox, you have a hammer, a wrench, a screwdriver, right? This is just adding another tool to your toolbox. And we try to show coaches, look, this is not going to change everything you've done. This is just going to add to it. This is going to help fine-tune your decision-making. And again, the coaches look around. When I was in the NFL, when Catapult first came out, 90% of them said, get that out of here. You're not going to tell me how to coach my team. All it takes is some people having success. All it takes is a few coaches winning, and it's like, wait a minute, what are they doing over there? And that starts to drive decision-making.
Hi. So I spoke to a former athlete that used one of the Whoop devices, and they really liked the experience using it, putting their information and getting feedback from it. Their one caveat was that when it would appear red or yellow or whatever, it would impact their performance right before a big event, and then sometimes they said that you guys would turn it off maybe a few days before. How do you think that would impact their mental health using it or not using it? And this one's specifically for Miss Elisa. How do you feel that little girls now growing up in this next generation feel that with new technology that you guys are developing, that you guys are researching on, they will have a better chance at becoming their elite, the way they see themselves in the future?
Okay, so the turning off of the recovery. Okay, so those of you if you're not familiar with it, so Whoop is a technology, so it's a wearable device where it samples your heart rate, and from that, it will in the morning it will give you a recovery score, which is based off of your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, your respiratory rate, your quantity and quality of sleep, where they have a big old algorithm to produce a recovery score. Right, and so most likely, when you are green, you are more recovered. When you are red, you are less resilient to stress. And then again, stress, whether it's physical stress, mental, emotional, all of those types of things. There were coaches that wanted recoveries turned off for their student athletes on game day because they didn't want them to wake up and see, I'm red today, oh my gosh, it's gonna be a bad day. That's not necessarily, that's not the case, right? That's just saying you are less resilient today in this moment in time. That is our job as staff members to educate. That doesn't mean if you wake up red, you're gonna explode. Not at all. You can have the best race of your life when you're red. It's just you are taking on stress, and that's okay. What it does prompt is all of the recovery habits that we know are helpful. So maybe, can you get a nap that day? So if your match isn't until 7 o'clock at night, you woke up at 10 a.m. and you saw that, okay, with that, then you can autocorrect, look at your day. Can you plug a nap in? Or I need to make sure I'm hydrated. I need to make sure I have a good pregame meal. All of those types of things. Or maybe I don't go scroll on Instagram for an hour, but I'm gonna take a nap. Whatever it may be to help guide decisions. Because what this is an educational tool to help the student athletes, the individual, learn about themselves and their reaction to any given stimulus, positively or negatively, and then be able to make decisions that will either help or not help that. And everybody is different of how different people react to different stresses. A part of that, so there was a coach, so it was a while ago, right? It's technology and things are finicky and there are loopholes and this, that, and the other. So the team had it turned off. And at one point in time, we were away, and one of the student athletes was like, I don't know why I'm red today. If you're the coach and he was walking by and he said, how are you doing? And she's like, actually, I feel fine. I don't know why I'm red. And all of a sudden, everyone was like, you shouldn't be able to see your recovery. Well, they found some sort of loophole being able to click through their app where they were able to see their recovery. So I instantly tighten up. I'm like, oh my gosh, how do we fix this? Because I know coach is going to be very angry now, or coach is now very angry and pulling me to the side being like, how does she know her recovery? But what that did, so as I spoke to that person on the side, she was like, yeah, everybody looks at their recovery on game day. Like, we want to know what it is, because then we can then make decisions based off of it. So that's why I don't, if they individually don't want to look at it, then don't look at it. If they want to look at it, look at it. Us as professionals teach them how to be their best version of themselves, no matter what they are at any given time. Yes. I think sky's the limit. Then that the technology is out there, the knowledge is out there. Personally, why I got into this profession, I tore 2 ACLs, one in high school, one in college, and my whole purpose is to help be the person that I am grateful that I had. I wanted to be an athletic trainer, and to not be the person that I'm not grateful that I had. The strength coach where we did the football workout, because that's just what, there was 3 people for all like all teams, and this is just what we did. Okay, I know it's important to individualize things. I know it's important to get to know people. I know managing your stress is important. So to be able to make those decisions to help others. Now you take the younger generation, and all as if this information is now available, and more people being able to help them that have the knowledge to make better decisions. So the research that we're doing, or that is being done around menstrual cycles and all of those decisions, that right, in general, women aren't studied because they have menstrual cycles, and it's too hard, too many hormones to mess with, too many things that could change the results. So we're only going to focus on middle-aged men because it's an easy population to study. So now that this door has opened to be able to get more knowledge to make better decisions is there, I'm really excited for the future of young female student athletes. Sorry to take over the stage on that one.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to everybody for attending today. This was a great session. Please join me in thanking our speakers for their time. Thank you, everybody. We hope you can join us for more Discovery Days, and we'll see you next time.